Welcome back to Starkiller Base. We're continuing our series on the Spirit of the Rebellion card analysis, and today we have the blue villain cards. So let's start things off with Assaj Ventress, the Force Assassin. She has 9 hit points. Her dice are a 1 melee, a 2 melee, a 1 focus, a 1 disrupt, a 1 resource, and a blank. She's a 12/15, and she has a really interesting character ability. It says, after an opponent discards a card from their hand to reroll dice, you may force them to choose and discard another card from their hand. So you'll note one thing. In the lore, she is Dooku's apprentice. She's also got very similar die size to Dooku. I believe that they're the same, except her 1 disrupt on Dooku is a 2 discard for 1. They've got similar hit points and a similar cost, so you can actually pair them together. Now, one thing about her ability that's really interesting, obviously, is that it lends itself well to a mill deck. If your opponent is discarding cards to reroll, it can be really brutal. One thing about it is her ability does not stop your opponent from being able to discard their last card to reroll. It would just be, they would discard it, and then you would have the option to say, hey, discard another card, but because they don't have any cards left, nothing happens. She's definitely an interesting character to pair up with something like Jabba. Instead of going Jabba Dooku, you can go Jabba Ventress. With the advent of the Vibro Knife being prevalent in the SoR meta, you may find that Dooku's ability doesn't really give him that much extra health, so you might find that Assaj is a better pairing with Jabba than Dooku is. But of course the biggest problem is that when you know that you're playing a Jabba Dooku deck and you know that Dooku is harder to kill, generally you build your deck to be blue heavy and rely on the fact that Jabba is going to die first. In a deck where you have Jabba at 11 hit points and Assaj at 9, and Assaj's ability being a constant ability more or less, you may find that Assaj will be the first one to go. Frankly, I'd kill her first. I think she definitely is best used in a mill deck with a secondary damage win condition, which is how most people play Jabba Dooku anyway. You sort of kill one character with Dooku and some lightsabers or something like that while making them discard their hand. So let's move on. Next, we have Darth Vader, Dark Apprentice. He is 11 hit points. His dice have a 1 ranged, a 2 melee, a 3 melee for 1, a discard, a special, and a blank. And the special reads, deal 3 damage to a character, then deal 1 damage to this character. So this guy has 4 damage sides on his dice, which is pretty bonkers. He's a 13/17, so you can pair him elite with a Kylo Ren elite or an FN 2199 elite if you want a little bit of extra color in your deck. The amount of damage this guy can do is apparently rather bonkers. He's got that nice range damage side, so if you're playing an It's a Trap deck, he can sneak that in potentially. If you have Darth Vader and Kylo, you've got a couple of guys that have some specials, so you can run things like the Emperor's Throne Room, and one of the supports we see coming up next, maybe the Command Shuttle. One thing you need to be very careful of with this Darth Vader, of course, is that Cunning will probably destroy this guy. If I have Cunning out on my character and I resolve Darth Vader's special, I can say, I'll deal 3 damage to Darth Vader, and then, because his special is being resolved, it will do 1 damage to him as well. So 2 or 3 of those and he's toast. So if we see Cunning rise up in the meta, then Darth Vader Dark Apprentice may be gone. But he's a very explosive character, and he can do some serious damage. So he's definitely one to keep an eye out for. And one of the best parts about it is that he's a Darth Vader that's not a legendary. Next we have Palpatine, the Galactic Emperor. He has 15 hit points. His dice are a 2 ranged, a 3 ranged, a 2 discard, a 2 shield, a 1 resource, and a blank. And he comes in at a whopping 21 or 28. His character ability reads, after you resolve this die, force an opponent to deal 2 damage to their characters distributed as they wish. This guy is nuts. I've seen a few videos from Tiny Grimes and various other people playing Elite Palpatine by himself, and he just destroys people. It's definitely a reason to play a 3-character list and get those extra hit points. I mean, you know, Pomaz is good and all that, but there's not that many hit points on that team, and Palpatine is basically giving you a countdown. You resolve a resource, and your opponent has to do 2 damage to their characters. So you put him together. He's super fast because he's got only 1 character. You can put holocron upgrades on him. You can run all the blue die control cards that you want, and he can just rip people's faces off. I mean, if you roll first turn, you go 3 ranged on his dice, and you resolve those, you're doing 6 damage to 1 character, and then your opponent has to do 4 more damage to their characters however they choose. I mean, that's half a lot of deck's hit points for the most part. Now, one thing I actually saw was kind of interesting was Palpatine with a TIE Pilot. The TIE Pilot adds the ability to make it so that Palpatine's die doesn't get removed. And what's really interesting is that you can run a TIE Pilot and have training. And if you happen to run the cargo bay as your battlefield, you can move training over to Palpatine and effectively have Elite Palpatine with a TIE Pilot. And you can only imagine how much damage that guy can do when your opponent can't even remove his dice. I hope that Palpatine does well in the meta when he's released, enough to be, strong, but not one that wins tournaments all the time. But we can end up with sort of a paper, rock, scissors thing, because with the advent of Unkar Plut and Jabba Crime Lord decks and that sort of thing, the last thing you want is to be running a single character. Christian from Severn Gaming Network actually killed Palpatine with a Crime Lord turn 1 in a game that he played, and that was it. Next we have the Royal Guard. He's the non-unique blue. 8 hit points. His dice show a 1 melee, a 2 melee, a +2 melee, a shield, and a blank. He comes in at 9 points. He is Guardian, and his character ability says you cannot play a blue abilities on this character. So one of the decks that has come out of this, obviously with him at 9 points, and the original Darth Vader Elite at 21, is Elite Vader Royal Guard as opposed to Elite Vader with a Tusken Raider. It's definitely more survivable. It's kind of interesting. I was making that comparison myself because I was playing Vader Raider in a tournament for pre-release, and it was the first time I'd played it, and I noticed that it's kind of difficult because, you've got your blue events to take care of your opponent's dice, but then when you look at what yellow offers, obviously you've got fast hands and that sort of thing, which is always nice, but blue die control, you have Electroshock, which is useful as long as the Raider is alive, and then he doesn't like you. But the problem I have with he doesn't like you is that normally you roll in Vader first because you want to put the pressure on your opponent, and you certainly don't want a he doesn't like you Vader's dice. So with the Royal Guard, you can just roll him in as a Guardian to take away the damage from your opponent without having to play a card from your hand, without having to rely on there being dice in the pool. There were turns where my opponent rolled in first action and had a die that I really wanted to take care of, and because I had he doesn't like you, I couldn't. He has a similar problem as the Raider in that you can't play blue ability upgrades on him. So you can play out a holocron on him and use that to switch in blue ability upgrades. Now, there are some other advantages to having a Royal Guard instead of a Raider in that you've got a mono blue deck, so you're going to be doing bigger no mercies. Vader is more survivable, which is always nice. I find that the Vader Raider is faster and a bit more aggressive, whereas the Royal Guard allows Vader to survive longer. So we'll see when the set comes out, we'll see which one of the decks rises to the top. Next we have the Command Shuttle. It is a 3-cost support. It's a vehicle. Its dice is a 2 ranged, a 2 shield, a 1 resource, a special, and a blank. The special reads, use a special ability on one of your characters. So this is a pretty expensive support for what it does. I mean, it's got a couple of 2s on the die, which is kind of nice, but you really can only run this in a deck that has probably 2 characters that have specials. So, a Darth Vader Dark Apprentice Kylo deck, I guess. But the thing is, you want those aggressive decks to be fast, and putting in a support like this doesn't make it fast. So I'm not really sold on it. But who knows? Maybe someone will prove me wrong. Next, we have Force Lightning. This is a 4-cost blue ability upgrade. Its die shows a 2 ranged, a 3 ranged for 1, a 4 ranged for 1, a special, and a blank. The card text reads, blue character only. The special is, deal 1 damage to a character. You may remove a die showing a blank to re-roll this die instead of removing it from your pool. So one of the things that saved me from having a huge problem with Holocron was that the blue ability upgrades don't do all that much damage. And then the next blue ability upgrade that I see spoiled is this one, and I say, oh my goodness. So hopefully it won't get out of hand with Holocron, but we'll see. I mean, the die sides are kind of similar to a rocket launcher, except they're cheaper, I guess. The damage is fantastic on that, and it synergizes with Palpatine really, really well because it's range damage. I guess Night Sisters could use it too, and not slow down the deck by mixing damage, but I'm not sure I'd want to put a 4-cost blue ability upgrade on a 7-hit point character unless I holocroned it in. Now, the special is really interesting. 1 damage isn't very much, but you can remove a die showing a blank, and this doesn't say it has to be your die, so you could remove an opponent's die showing a blank, so it does have some sort of built-in die control to some degree. and it does synergize with one of the cards, Manipulate, that we'll see later in this video. So it's kind of handy. I'd keep an eye out for it. I ran it in my Vader Raider deck at the pre-release instead of a Mind Probe, and I didn't like it very much. I got 4 damage deflected at me a couple times, and there were times where I wanted to smash a guy for a big damage hit, but I had melee and range damage mixed, so without running that battlefield that allows you to resolve up to 3 dice showing ranged or melee damage, you can't really do that. Next we have the Lightsaber Pike. It is a 3-cost upgrade weapon. It has 1 melee, a +2 melee, a +4 melee for 1, a shield, a resource, and a blank. It has an action on it. It says remove this die to give a non-attached character 1 shield. So this is a weapon that would work really well on a Royal Guard, I suppose, because it's not a blue ability, and if you roll badly, you could remove the die to give Darth Vader a shield or somebody like that. However, when the top end of this die is 4 damage, you probably don't want to remove it to get a shield. This thing is pretty bonkers. How it compares to a lightsaber, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's got, like, lightsabers have a similar number of damage sides. The top end isn't as large on a lightsaber, but it does have redeploy, and it costs the same. But, you could put in both, I suppose. It's a really interesting card, and I saw a guy at the pre-release, one of my friends, Chris. He had Dooku out with I think it was a lightsaber pike and a Kylo's lightsaber or something like that, and he rolled in 11 damage and just smashed Vader across the table in one shot. It was pretty gross. Next we have Lure of Power. This is a 2-cost upgrade, and its dice are really interesting. It is a +1 with no symbol, +1 with no symbol, +2 with no symbol, a resource, and 2 blanks. It says you may resolve the modifier sides of this die to modify any symbol. It's pretty interesting. I mean, you can use it to get 3 resources off of a single resource, take 3 shields off of a single shield. I think this card is rather versatile. I actually would say it would be best used modifying focuses in a deck, maybe a Dooku Ventress deck or something like that. I mean, when you can turn 1 focus into 3 focus, you can change your dice to just destroy your opponent or do whatever it is you really need at the time. Now, one thing to note is that this does not have the ability trait, so you cannot put it in with the Sith Holocron. Also, you can put it on Royal Guards because it is not an ability. It's an interesting card, and definitely keep an eye out for it in the future. Next, let's move on to the cards that don't have dice. We start off with Anger. This is a 0-cost event. It says play only if you have 2 or more dice showing blanks. Resolve an opponent's die showing damage as if it were your die. This card is nuts. I mean, it is 0 cost, which is great, obviously, but it does have a pretty situational trigger here. You have to have 2 or more dice showing blanks. If you're running holocrons and data pads and things that have extra blanks, then it's great. But I mean, that ability on it is fantastic. I mean, that's reversal, which normally costs 3. So if you can pull this off, then it can be devastating. Next, we have Lightsaber Throw. It is a 1-cost event. Play only if you have 1 or more dice showing melee damage. Deal 2 damage to a character. Now, I've seen people put this in a Vader Raider or Vader Royal Guard deck, which is kind of interesting. But my biggest problem with it is that if you've got a Vader die out showing a 2 or a 3, it's nice to squeak out that extra damage, but the longer you leave that Vader die out there, the more likely it is going to get mitigated or eaten or guardianed or whatever. I think it's really good on a deck that has smaller melee damage sides, like what we saw in a Kylo Dooku. Your opponent's got 3 hit points left, and you have a Kylo die showing 1 melee damage. You go Lightsaber Throw and then do the melee damage the next action and kill him. So it's definitely interesting, but in the right deck. Next, we have Manipulate, which I mentioned earlier. It is a 0-cost event. Turn one of your dice to a side showing a blank, then turn an opponent's die to a side showing a blank. So this is sort of like he doesn't like you. You blank your crappiest die, and you blank your opponent's best die. Now, one thing that you need to be careful of is that when you go to turn a die, you can only turn it to a different side. So you cannot blank a die that is already showing a blank unless that die happens to have 2 blanks like you see on Lure of Power up there, or a Sith Holocron or something like that. Now, we see the synergy here between Anger and Manipulate, right? Say you rolled out your dice and you got a blank, a shield, and a 2 melee damage. You play Manipulate to turn your shield to a blank, so you've got 2 blanks, and then you play Anger and hit them in the face with one of their own dice. Just need to be careful that someone doesn't play Feel Your Anger on you when you've made more blanks on your side of the board. Next we have No Disintegrations. It is a 1-cost event. It reads discard the top card of an opponent's deck, or 3 instead if there's another copy of this event in your discard pile. So that's another one of those ones where it's better if you've got a second copy of it. However, this does have a decent effect when you don't have another copy of it in your discard pile, so it's not too bad. I mean, you're paying a resource and a card to mill your opponent by 1, which is not particularly efficient, I suppose, because it's costing you a card and a resource, but when that second one hits, you're ahead. So it could be good in a Dooku Jabba deck or something like that, some sort of blue villain mill deck, so keep an eye out for that one. And the art on it is fantastic. Next we have Now You Will Die. It is a 1-cost event. It reads resolve one of your dice as if it were showing melee damage. It keeps its original value. So this one's pretty interesting. If you have 2 discard on Dooku, you can turn it to melee damage. If you get the 2 disrupt on Vader, you can turn it to melee damage. There's all kinds of things like that, which is pretty neat. If you have a Palpatine die, you could put this in your deck and resolve the shields as melee damage. The one thing to keep an eye out for this is that you cannot use it to resolve one of your dice that has a pay side without still paying for it, and you can't use it to resolve one of your modified sides because it would become a modified melee damage side, and you can't resolve that by itself. Next we have Rise Again. This one has been making some waves. It is a 5-cost event. Yeah, I said 5. It says heal 5 damage from a unique blue character. You may play an upgrade from your discard pile on it for free. 5 resources to heal 5 damage is, not too bad. I mean, it's not as efficient as a field medic, but how about paying 5 to get a Mind Probe, or a Force Lightning, or a Kylo Ren's lightsaber, or something like that, and heal 5 damage from your character? That's pretty damn good. Now, one thing that has happened in my testing, I was playing Kylo Dooku against Vader Royal Guard, is that I hit Rise Again with Kylo's ability twice and wrecked Vader with it pretty badly. So keep an eye out for that. If you're playing against a Kylo deck and you roll some specials or Emperor's Throne Room is out there, you may need to ditch it just in case. Next we have The Price of Failure. Spot a blue character and defeat one of your characters to ready a character. So this one is sort of like the blue villain version of Leadership. It lends itself naturally to a Vader Raider or Vader Royal Guard, or if you had some sort of deck where you had 2 First Order Stormtroopers and, Elite Dooku or something like that, you can load up all your upgrades on one character and then roll them in, resolve their dice, and then defeat one of your characters and then ready that character again. So, a good example would be you're playing Vader Royal Guard. The Royal Guard has 6 damage on it from guarding things. You roll in Vader, you smack somebody around with his dice. He's got a couple of lightsabers on him. And for 0, you play The Price of Failure, kill the Royal Guard, ready Vader again, and do it all over again. And I've seen games get turned by this card. I actually lost to a guy who was playing Vader Raider and killed his full health Tusken Raider to roll in Vader again and finish me off, and it was discouraging. All right, so next we have Dark Presence. This one I'm really excited about. It is a 0-cost support. After one of your dice rolls a discard, you may exhaust this support to force an opponent to choose and remove one of their dice. So obviously it's going to be their worst die, but this is 0 cost. It's non-unique, so you can have 2 of them in there. If you're playing a deck like Jabba Dooku or something like that, it really, really works well with Jabba because Jabba has the ability to roll in both of his dice, or all of his dice if he's got upgrades. And if he hits the discard, you Dark Presence to make them get rid of 1 or 2 of their dice. And then even if you don't need the discard, you can use Jabba's ability to re-roll the die. The only problem I have with it is that when I was playing Dark Presence in Jabba Dooku, is that I would go, okay, I want Jabba to roll in first because I want to get that card discard and put pressure on his hand. But the problem is, if I'm first and he doesn't have any dice rolled in, then why am I playing Dark Presence? So there's a delicate balance there, and it's going to be tricky to figure it out exactly. Next, we have Now I Am the Master. It is a 1-cost upgrade. Again, not an ability upgrade, so it can go on the Royal Guard, and you cannot holocron it in. After attached character's character or upgrade dice deal damage, you may exhaust this upgrade to turn a die to a side showing a blank. So obviously this is one of these things where you want to normally use it on your opponent. Say I roll in a hired gun, turn 1, and you smack me with 1 melee damage from a royal guard or 3 damage from Vader, and you just blank the die. Fantastic. Is it worth an upgrade slot? That I'm not sure about. It's interesting die control, but with people wanting to put force speeds and fast hands and things on people, that 3 upgrade slots is not very big. Now, one thing you could do, I suppose, sort of a, I don't know, pro tip, I guess you can call it. If you had a die you couldn't resolve, like a lightsaber die with 3 melee for 1, and your opponent's showing a force throw special, you could always blank your own die so that they can't throw 3 in your face. You could also blank your own die and then use, if you had 2 blanks, you could then play anger. I think that's pretty niche, but, you know, it doesn't say opponent's die, so it's got some versatility to it. That's it for our blue villains from the Spirit of the Rebellion, so keep an eye out for the next video in the series coming soon. If you like the video, please like and subscribe to our channel so we can continue to bring you Destiny content. Thanks for watching, everybody.